A human being can survive for over 3 weeks without food. We can endure a week without sleep. But without water, we'll be dead in 3 days. Water is one of the most important substances on Earth. It's essential for life. Nearly 3/4 of our bodies are water. Water circulates, changes form. It's called the water cycle. Oh, that's more like it. Continue my search for water in the desert later in the programme, but my investigation into the water cycle started somewhere rather more soggy. The Peak District is an area of countryside between the cities of Manchester, Sheffield and Birmingham. The first day of my investigation into the water cycle, and what can I hear? Well, that can only mean one thing. Time for a cuppa. I'd been sent to one of the wettest places in the UK, the Peak District in Derbyshire. So it was hardly surprising that it was raining. Even with all this water around, it's still important to bring along enough to keep going. But you know, the water in this bottle once fell as rain on these hills. My assignment is to follow the journey of these raindrops falling here today and find out how some of them end up coming out of our taps. My journey round the water cycle starts high in the sky, in these dark grey clouds. They're made up of tiny water droplets, and the clouds eventually release these water droplets as raindrops. This is the first stage of the water cycle. You can easily see what happens next right here. This part of the Peak District is known as the Dark Peak because the hills are covered with peat, which is what makes them appear dark. If I dig into this peat, just look at all the water that comes out. Peat's what's described as porous. It holds water just like a sponge. Even if it hasn't rained here for ages, you can still find water deep inside the peat. This layer of peat is extremely deep. It can be as much as 7 meters thick. The rain soaks through the surface peat and collects in a layer of water underground. Water that can be found in the ground is called groundwater. Below a certain depth, the peat is completely sodden or saturated with water. It can absorb no more. This level is called the water table. When it's been very wet, the water table's quite near the surface. If it hasn't rained for a while, it's deeper underground. It's obviously been raining quite a lot here lately. Look, some of the rainwater's trickling down the surface, making rivulets, mini rivers which trickle off down the hillside. We'll catch up with them later. But first, what about this groundwater? There's vast amounts of water underground, but to get to it, I'm going to have to dig a little deeper. I headed to the southern section of the Peak District, known as the White Peak. And if you take a look at the rocks, you can probably work out why. They're limestone, and their off-white colour is very different from the Dark Peak. Another key feature of limestone is that it's permeable, full of lots of little joints or holes which allow the water to flow through. And where the water goes, I have to follow.
Okay, Steve, there's a bit around here I want to show you. It's somewhere.
My guide to groundwater is a local caver, Chris Clark.
Okay, here we come, yeah. See on this surface here, these scallop-like features. We have to imagine a long time ago, maybe tens of thousands of years ago, this whole cave passage was full of water flowing through at high speeds, and it was turbulence on the wall here, carving out and dissolving out these beautiful, beautiful scallop forms.
What about these, this almost wave-like effect down here?
That's interesting because that's telling us when the water levels were gradually falling over time, and so maybe we had water at this level for some period of time.
These marks on the rock are a powerful reminder of groundwater from many years ago. But I wanted to find the groundwater that's in the cave today. Chris led the way.
Ah, we're finding some water at last. Looks like it's just coming straight out of the rock.
So where's all this coming from? Is this coming directly from the surface?
Yeah, this is probably rainwater, a matter of, you know, days or a few weeks ago, and it's just slowly seeping through.
There's not much water coming through here, but I can hear more water off in the distance.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Let's follow our ears.
It's very, very narrow to try and get through. Everything's very wet and slippery, and trying to get your grip is really, really tough. Oh, listen to that. It's amazing. I guess in the outside world you're so used to having loads of noise going on all the time, loads of different kinds of noises. But down here it's almost totally silent, except for the dripping of water, and I can hear a gurgling stream somewhere as well, nearby. It's really quite spooky. Now keep moving. I don't want to let Chris get too far ahead of me. Last thing I want down here is to be lost. Here, they've dressed me up in these special, supposedly watertight overalls. But already I've got little drips going down the back of my neck and flooding into me wellies. It's lovely. Wow, you can really see the water pouring through here. So why is it choosing to come through this crack here?
Well, it's found a line of weakness. It's a bit like, imagine a cake with some jam in the middle. That's like the line of weakness. So the water chose to come through here, and then the acid in the water has slowly dissolved away the limestone and made the crack wider and wider.
How long do you think that's taken to make a gap this big?
It's hard to say exactly, but people reckon that limestone can dissolve away at about 1 millimetre every year or so. So maybe this is a few hundreds of years.
Where's it going to go on to now?
Keeps going down through the cave, and eventually it'll emerge outside.
The water breaks out of the ground lower down the hillside, making a spring like this. Springs tend to come and go, depending on how wet it's been. The spring water trickles down the hillside. It joins the rivulets we saw earlier running down the surface from the top of the hills. These trickles come together to form small streams. The streams join with other streams, getting bigger and bigger until they become rivers. So, let's catch up with my progress around the water cycle. Clouds release their rain over the hills. Much of the rain soaks into the ground to become groundwater. Some groundwater stays underground for many years, but some escapes to the surface to form springs, which come together to make streams. As they trickle down the hillsides, the streams join together, getting bigger as they go, until they become rivers. Here in the Peak District, the trickles, springs and streams on the hillsides finally flow into the River Derwent. But the river's about to be stopped in its tracks, and so am I, by this enormous dam. This is the Derwent Dam, an extremely strong wall built across the river. It traps the water in a huge artificial lake called a reservoir. Some of the water continues downriver, but enough is stored here in this reservoir to supply people and industries in cities, towns and villages throughout the year. Further down the Derwent Valley, the Lady Bower Dam was built in the early 1940s. Before the reservoir was built, there were 2 villages and a school where there's now only water. Maurice Cotterell's family have been farming in the Peak District for hundreds of years. When they started building the Lady Bower Dam, Maurice was only 7 years old.
When we used to go to school, and on the school bus, the first thing we ever knew about it was there was a white board up. A piece of board about, 6 foot long and 6 inches wide, painted white, about 200 yards apart, all the way around the valley, and that was the height of the reservoir. And that's when we realised that, something was going on. He was just told that, you was going to lose your house in 3 months' time, or next week, or 12 months' time, and you had to accept it.
If we want an endless supply of water, we must have reservoirs. But we need to be careful where they're sited. And this is Lady Bower Reservoir today. Before the water in here is ready for you and me to drink, it needs to be purified, cleaned up. It travels along pipes and is pumped to a water treatment plant. The clean water then travels to our homes, to businesses and to factories to be used. But the water cycle doesn't stop here. We may be using the water, but it isn't used up. When we use it, we're really just making it dirty. And that includes when we drink it. Excuse me. Dirty water is called wastewater. I'm supposed to be following this water cycle. After you. It travels along pipes from our houses, through the sewers, and eventually arrives at wastewater treatment works. Like this one in Hull. The raw wastewater rushes in, and the large solids are filtered out using a wire mesh. Next, the finer solids are removed in here. Oh! The clear water runs off for further cleaning. So only 8 hours after the dirty water entered the wastewater treatment plant, the water that runs off the top here is clean enough to go back into our rivers without causing me or anyone or anything any harm. Now, we followed the River Derwent right from its source in the Rainy Hills of the Peak District. First, it travels south, joining up with other rivers until it flows into the River Trent. This heads north until it reaches the Humber Estuary and the sea. And here I am, right in the middle of the Humber. It's really wide and it's carrying a huge amount of water. Some of it has been drunk and flushed down the loo. Some of it will have been used by industry, and some has followed undisturbed all the way down from the Peak District. But every single drop once fell as rain. Well, my journey following the water cycle is nearing its end. Let's see where we've got to. The rain falls mostly on hills. Most water soaks into the ground, but some of it eventually comes out in springs, which join up to form streams and rivers. Some of these rivers are dammed to form reservoirs. The water's purified and piped to homes, businesses and factories. Once used, the water's cleaned and returned to rivers and the sea. But that's not the end of the water cycle. The sun heats up the sea, turning some of the water into water vapour! The water vapour rises and is carried off into the air. This is called evaporation. Eventually it cools down and forms clouds, bundles of tiny droplets of water, condensation. These clouds then travel through the sky until they release the water droplets as rain, often over the hills. And so the cycle begins again, with water falling as rain on these soggy hills. Oh, good, looks like he's brewing up. Just fancy a cuppa. So we're back where we started. And guess what? It's still raining. But what happens in areas where there's virtually no rain? I travelled to the driest place in the United States to find out. The Great American Desert. It's 4 times the size of Britain. My lips are cracked. Tongue feels like sandpaper. The heat's almost unbearable. I've got to get out of here. This area gets only 5 centimetres of rain a year. And in a place like this, a glimpse of water is often just a cruel mirage. And yet here, in this parched desert, is the real thing. Miles and miles and miles of it. Lake Mead. So in the middle of the desert, how did all this water get here? Well, surprising as it might seem, most of the water in Lake Mead got here by exactly the same principles as in the Rainy Peak District. The water cycle. But the Peak District relies on rain falling on the hills, and it certainly doesn't rain much here. It's not rain, but snow which falls on the Rocky Mountains hundreds of miles upriver. The melting snow flows down into the mighty Colorado River, but only a trickle of its precious water makes it to the sea. The Colorado has more dams than any other river in the world. Just like in the Peak District, the dams trap the water for people to use. This is the Hoover Dam, which creates Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the US. Lake Mead holds enough water to flood the whole of the Netherlands to a depth of about 30 centimetres. And enough water to mean that millions of people can live in this arid desert, in the big cities of Phoenix, Tucson, and Las Vegas. But wherever you are, every drop of water is part of the same water cycle, which means there's as much water in the Earth's system today as there was millions of years ago.
Flooding has a big impact on many people's lives around the world. Find out how it affects them in the next Primary Geography at 10 to 11 next Monday morning. Mrs. Mickle is on a fact-finding expedition now on BBC Two in Razzle Dazzle.